One thing they don't tell you about becoming a content creator is you need to plan ahead in order to plan your content so that they align with the seasons and the holidays that are coming up. But one thing about me is I cannot for the life of me pick out a Halloween costume ahead of time. It has to be last minute. Also, let's just ignore the fact that if I were a faster editor, I wouldn't have to pick my Halloween costume so much ahead of time. Because I found a loophole, it's fine. I don't need to pick a Halloween costume ahead of time because instead I'm going to be making a Halloween vest. So I went ahead and sketched out this vest design, and I was really inspired by vintage Halloween imagery. But I wanted the style of things to be somewhat cohesive, but at the same time, I didn't want to get too attached to this image because actually I gave myself the added challenge of thrifting my fabric today. Now, I say this is a challenge, but I actually found it quite freeing to give up the control of how the fabric is going to look in order to bring some life into some secondhand fabrics. So I have thrifted 4 men's button-ups and they are quite wrinkly. So let's go to my ironing board so I can give you more details on these shirts. So when I was thrifting these men's button-ups, I really wanted to thrift 100% cotton button-ups for this project, but unfortunately I was a little limited when it came to the orange button-up because there wasn't a lot of orange there. So this is the one shirt that is more polyester than cotton. Another thing I was kind of thinking about when I was thrifting was price point. I did want to keep the price of each button-up down to around $2. I didn't necessarily hit that for all of them, but I think I hit that for about half of them. I'll put all the button-ups on the screen once I've pressed them with the exact price and fabric makeup if you're interested. I know I'm nosy and I would like to know that information, but my advice to you if you want to do a similar project to this is be a little bit flexible when you can when it comes to colors. So an example of that is I really wanted to have this kind of dusty blue color, and I did kind of find that, but it's almost like blue purple. I don't know if it'll come off on screen that way, but I really just had to compromise, and I think it'll look fine in the final piece. But that's just the realities of working with thrifted fabric. And then another piece of advice is to set out a lot of time to look for your button-ups, because actually I had to go to 2 thrift stores. I have one thrift store close by me that I love for women's clothing, but I've actually never thrifted a men's button-up from there, and so I didn't realize that their men's button-up section was super small, and so I wasn't able to find anything for this project. But then the next thrift store that I went to, I hit the jackpot and I found all of these from that second thrift store. Another compromise I had to make, kind of on the topic of color, is originally I wanted a dark gray and a black button-up, but I had to just compromise with a charcoal because I just couldn't find many black button-ups that day. I think if I had spent a little bit more time and went to maybe another thrift store, I probably would have found one, but just something to keep in mind if you want to make a similar patchwork vest like this. Have I even introed what the project is gonna be? I am making a patchwork Halloween vest, and I'm hoping that this vest will be so classically Halloween that I can wear it year after year. I think this button-up is the smallest of all of the ones that I had thrifted. It's actually just a large. I was really trying to thrift specifically extra larges or XXL or like the tall section of button-ups just to have more fabric to play with. I am certain that I have plenty of fabric, and then the other colors that I need to grab for the vest will be scraps from other projects. I already went ahead and washed all these button-ups as soon as I got home, and that's kind of why they're so wrinkled. And I guess you don't really have to iron them out before you start working, but I just feel like it is going to make my life a little bit easier if I iron them. So that's why I'm doing it in this order. But after I do this, my goal today is to go ahead and drape my vest pattern. I know there are plenty of vest patterns online, and if you want to tackle this project in a quick way, you could definitely do that. But I know I can drape a vest pattern pretty quickly and easily on my dress form, so that's what I'm going to do.
Okay, here's my first muslin. I'm trying not to be super crazy about perfecting the fit, but I kind of can't help myself. I think I want to bring this out a little bit more to get more of a like triangular shape, because I feel like right now it's very rectangular. But overall, this was a pretty good first round. I really wanted the armhole to be nice and wide to fit over a boxy t-shirt, and I do think I succeeded there. Somehow I made the back a little bit shorter than the front, so obviously I will need to correct that. But the length is actually pretty good. And yeah, I don't think I need a second muslin. I think what I want to do is proceed with the real fabric and then just kind of tweak it from there. Since this design doesn't really need to fit anywhere super precisely, I feel like I can just trim away where I need to and it'll be okay. But yeah, I'm really excited to get into the real fabric.
So yesterday I finalized my vest pattern, and then I drew the lines that I had in my sketch that kind of patchworked the vest all together, and I traced those pieces out, so that's all ready to go today. So today I'm planning on cutting out my fabric and sewing that all together, and then I really want to start on the little applique patches. Also, I really wanted to wear like more cozy fall outfits in this video, but it is so hot in my office all the time. So I hope you'll excuse this more summery outfit for today. So I'm gonna start harvesting the fabric off of these men's button-ups. And I've seen people do this a couple of different ways. I think I'm just gonna start with cutting off the sleeves and seeing how much fabric I can get from just the sleeves alone. And it would probably make more satisfying content if I were to cut up the whole button up to show you all of the pieces laying flat. But I wonder if I can reuse these button ups in different ways, and if I will want to use the collar and the placket detail in something else. So I kind of want to leave those untouched if I can, but I feel like there's a lot of fabric in the sleeves, so I actually wonder if I can do this whole vest with just the sleeve fabric. I think it's at least worth a shot to try. But yeah, let me go ahead and get started. To prepare my sleeve fabric, I cut off the sleeve starting at the armpit. Then I cut straight down the sleeve seam, making sure that I was only cutting through one layer. Then I carefully cut off the cuff and lastly I cut off the rest of the sleeve seam. Then I just repeated that 4 more times. Then I cut my pattern pieces out of the sleeves and sewed them all together. And this is how it's looking so far.
Good morning. So today I am going to start working on the little patches or applique, and I'm really excited to get started because I'm not really sure how this is gonna look, but so far just the little cutouts that I've done look so cute. So I'm really excited just to bring this whole thing to life. So some of y'all are gonna laugh at me because there are definitely some people who can just go with the flow and wing it, but that is not me. So to figure out the sizing for the patches, I just roughly cut out the size of my little motifs and placed them on the vest as I have now. And it only took like a couple rounds, and now I have the right size of all my little applique pieces. And then I went ahead and printed and cut out the little applique pieces with some seam allowance. And I think there are a couple ways you can go about doing the applique. You could just cut out your pieces without seam allowance and sew them down with the raw edges still. I don't really like that option because I really want this vest to be something that I can come back to and wear every Halloween. I think fraying as an intentional detail has a time and place, but for me, it might deter me from wearing this piece over and over again. So I want all my edges to be finished as I am patchworking them down. And so I think what I'm gonna do is cut out the fabric, and then maybe I will cut out the pieces in a cardstock and kind of use that as a way to press the seams the way that I want them and then stitch them down. I don't really know how that's gonna go, but we'll try it together. I think another way you could do it is to cut two and sew them right sides facing and then turn it inside out. I think that would also look really good. And then another way I could think to do this is maybe do it more like the first method that I was mentioning, where you just cut one, but then you could use a hand sewing needle to carefully press the raw edges inward. And I feel like that option would give you a lot of control, but it definitely would be the slowest because you're hand sewing. But yeah, first I'm gonna try out that first option because I think that would be the fastest. And also the second option that I was mentioning of cutting two might result in a thicker fabric, which could be fine for the design that you're working with. But for me, I know I'm already gonna have a lining fabric, and I think I'm also gonna add a batting layer. So this actually might end up kind of thick. So I wanna try to minimize the layers of fabric if at all possible. Yeah, so far this is looking so cute, and I'm really excited to see how my little motifs look.
When it came to the appliques, I really didn't know how I would accomplish them, so I tried a few different things. First, I tried the method I had mentioned in the last clip, where I cut out my motifs with seam allowance, and then I tried pressing the motif with a piece of cardstock to try to help me press in some guides, but that didn't really help me as much as I thought. So I decided to cut out a piece of interfacing that was exactly the size of my little bat, and I ended up repeating the ironing step as best I could, and then I took that to the sewing machine to attempt to sew it. Since it's such a small piece of fabric, I sewed it with some tissue paper underneath to keep it from getting caught by the feed dogs. This kind of worked, but I wasn't all that happy with the results, so I tried hand sewing the bat motif next. I used interfacing again to give me a guide like last time, and additionally I tried cutting off the ears from my motif since they seemed to be the hardest part to sew, but I still really wasn't loving the results of this.
This is a rare occurrence. I am filming on a Sunday, but I have been working on hand stitching these little bats, and I am not loving how they're coming out, so I think it's time for me to pivot. I found this Heat Bond light sewable iron-on adhesive at Michael's, and I actually think this might be a better solution for me for these little intricate shapes, because I want to make it clear I am not scared of hand sewing. The hand sewing actually is going way quicker than I thought it would, but I'm just not enjoying the sharp angles that I'm getting, and I just feel like I should pivot now before I get in too deep. So yeah, the way this works is it attaches to your fabric, just kind of like interfacing, and then on the other side there is kind of like a sticky backing, so I can just stick it right on to my vest. And I specifically got the sewable kind because I want to use my machine to kind of sew along the edges. And my sewing machine is actually an embroidery machine. I personally have not used all the embroidery capabilities that my machine has, but I thought this would be a great opportunity to try some new stitches out in my machine. But yeah, today I want to see if I can cut out all my motifs with this heat bond attachment and get that all together. Since I'm kind of starting from the beginning again, I just want to be able to catch up. I don't think it'll take me too long, but yeah, I think doing it this way will make me a lot more happy with the shapes. And I still intend to add some hand stitching detail because I just want this to feel kind of like homey and warm, and I feel like hand stitching gives that kind of quality to clothing more than machine stitching does. So I just want this to be kind of like a mixed media like piece. So yeah, let me go ahead and get to cutting out my shapes in my fabric and see how this works.
I cut a piece of fabric off of my sleeve that was just big enough for my motif, and then I cut a piece of the heat bond paper to a similar size. Then I just followed the instructions on the back of the packaging and ironed the fabric to the paper liner. I cut the bond paper liner to be smaller than the fabric for the rest of my applique because for this first one I didn't do that and it definitely left some residue on my ironing board, but I've been needing a new cover for a while now, so it's alright. After bonding the paper to the fabric, I cut my bats out and I peeled off the paper backing and ironed the bats straight onto the vest. The packaging said to iron for 6 seconds, but I did find that it took a little bit longer for the applique to fully bond to the vest. Since I was now confident about my applique method, I went ahead and cut out the rest of my applique pieces. For the motifs that had additional little cutouts to them, I cut those pieces with the leftover fabric and paper that had been bonded already and attached them by just ironing them on.
I'm back in my studio today and I have been working for a little bit. I was just adding some eyes to my skull and my little cat patch. And now that I have all the little finer details that I wanted to add with fabric applique, I am going to add all my little patches to my vest panels. So I'm really excited to do that because after that, I'm going to be hand sewing little details and using my machine to add some details with machine embroidery as well. So I'm so excited to get into that. So far, this heat and bond product is a win for me. This is making my life so much easier. I guess the real test will be if I were to wash this vest, how much everything frays. But so far, I think this was totally worth it. They also have a version of this product that is permanent and that you're not really supposed to sew over. So if you are not someone who is interested in sewing on these little patches, you could definitely grab that instead of this one. Yeah, I'm sure that one is a little bit more heavy duty and maybe it would hold the potential fray back a little bit more. Yeah, I am super excited to get into the finer details today. So let's get into ironing my motifs on my vest panels. So this is how my vest is looking so far, and I think it's so cute. I was also just playing with my machine and just trying to figure out what stitches could work for this project. I think this one is kind of out of the question. It's a little too crazy, but these are all pretty cool. This one might be a little bit difficult to control if I were actually using it on a motif. I think I want to go ahead and add some outlines to my skull, and I also want to try to add some outlines to the ghost with my machine, and I'm going to see how that goes before I add it to other shapes, but I think that it would work on the more simple shapes like the pumpkin and the hat as well. And then I think I'm gonna stitch an outline by hand for the cat and the bats. I'll add the teeth, the pumpkin stem, and the cat eyes with hand sewing. Oh, and also the hat, like little detail like ribbon kind of thing right there. I want to kind of set the outlines first to give this a really solid foundation. And yeah, I'm really excited to add those little details because I think that'll add some like warmth.
I started out with this embroidery setting from my machine to add a border to my skull because I really liked how I could center it neatly so it could stitch into the background and applique. I did have to iron on some interfacing to the back to stiffen up the fabric and prep it for the embroidery, and I also switched to a light gray thread, and I absolutely love how this came out. Then I tried the same embroidery on the ghost, and I really love how this came out too. Even though I didn't line it up perfectly in some areas, it still looked so cute, which encouraged me to use it on the rest of the motifs as well.
Good morning. So last night I finished using my machine to do the gray embroidery outline on all my motifs, and I really like how that's looking. I did attempt that same type of stitch on the smallest bat, and I didn't like how it looked. I felt like it just confused the outline of the shape, and it just made it kind of confusing as to what you were looking at. So what I ended up doing is I used some black thread to outline the shape of the bat, and then since the gray thread was still poking through and just making it confusing, I used some black Sharpie to just kind of color that thread a little bit. I specifically didn't use the Sharpie on the outside of the silhouette because I wanted to concentrate it on the shape of the bat. And yeah, it's actually looking okay now. So for the rest of the bats, I use my machine embroidery to kind of do it looks like a straight stitch, but it goes back and forth twice. And I just outline each of the bats with my machine that way. So yeah, today I'm going to do a lot more hand embroidery. I want to finish up the little details on the vest, and then I also plan to work on the back of the vest today. And I kind of have a cool idea for that, so I'm excited. Realistically, I am running out of time on this vest, but I do think I can wrap it up before I need to put this video out. I would love to finish it today. I could work on it tomorrow as well, so if I don't finish it today, I still got a little bit more time, but I gotta finish it, I think today or tomorrow. Otherwise, I don't know how I'm going to be able to edit this video in time. So yeah, let me go ahead and get started, and hopefully we have a really productive day today.
For the skull's teeth, I used a back stitch, and for the nose, I used a detached chain stitch. For the witch hat and the pumpkin stem, I used a chain stitch. I'm not an expert at hand embroidery, but I did my best. I didn't absolutely love how the pumpkin stem looked, but I completely ran out of this green thread, so I went with it. Then I pivoted to cutting out the back pattern pieces because I wanted to do some embroidery back there as well.
So this is how the back is looking, and the center part lined up so nicely. I'm really impressed with myself, and it's kind of funny because I was telling myself that the center didn't need to line up perfectly because I was planning on just putting a spider in the middle there, so it didn't need to line up. But now that it does, and it looks pretty good, I'm like, I need to show this off, right? So I'm thinking instead of putting the spider in the middle, I think I'll put it like in this panel here. And I was looking up inspiration photos for spider embroidery, and some people get theirs so realistic, and that's not what I want. This is on the back of the vest, so if someone gets confused and thinks that there's a spider on me, I'm definitely gonna forget that I put spider embroidery back here and I'll freak out. So I am gonna go more cartoonish with it. I was thinking of using a button and just putting little legs outwards and just leaving it at that, nothing too realistic. And I feel like I'm making really good progress today. The other thing that I want to do today is maybe add some details in the middle here, just to give this like a little bit more texture. It's kind of feeling a little too clean for my tastes. I don't know if I'll do the same for the back panel. Maybe I'll do some top stitching or something like that. But yeah, I'm really excited with the progress that I've made today, and I'm so happy that I'm making the back a little bit more interesting, because I feel like sometimes it's a bummer when the front design is really cool and very inspired, but the back design doesn't give you any indication of it. So I think this will look really nice. Oh, and I did have to cut in to the second sleeve of the dark charcoal shirt. But other than that, I haven't used more than one sleeve's worth of fabric. I think that will not be true though pretty soon, because I don't really have enough fabric to cut the lining pieces. So I'll probably have to cut into the real shirt fabric at that point. But I'm really impressed with how little fabric this has taken so far. But yeah, let me go ahead and start sewing this spider, and I'll show you what it looks like when I'm done. Check it out. I free-handed it and it looks so good. I mean, it doesn't look perfect, but I kind of like that. And I know spiders have 8 legs and I only did 6. I feel like 8 legs wouldn't look as cute. So
After I had all my hand embroidery done, I wanted to add some more machine embroidery to the patchwork seams just to give the vest a bit more texture. So I added this kind of spider-like embroidery to the left side and this star embroidery to the right side. Then I wanted to add the embroidery that reminded me of a spider to the back seams as well, since they were looking a little bare. And I even got the center of the embroidery to line up nicely in the middle of all the patchwork.
Okay, I am almost done with this project. All I have to do is put these pieces together, put my lining together, and I think I'm gonna put some batting in between. I have actually never used batting before because I've actually never made a quilt, but I think using this batting will make the vest feel more substantial. Oh yeah, and then I have to bind all the edges of the vest, but actually I am in the home stretch, so I feel pretty good about that. I am really loving how this is looking. Adding those little extra stitches on the back did make this more like textured, which I feel like messes with how crisp it was looking before, but I think it's okay, and it'll make it look a little bit more homemade, which is kind of the vibe that I'm going for this project anyway. And I don't know if the batting will help make that whole thing make more sense. So we'll see. But either way, I'm happy and I'm fine with it. But yeah, actually those steps are pretty simple and it's towards the end of the day today. I think I'm gonna do those last couple steps off camera just to save me a little bit of time. And then I'll come back at the end to show you the finished result.
Okay, it's finally done. I am so happy with this Halloween vest. I've never really made anything quite like this. So I just thought it was such a fun first attempt at applique. I'm not gonna lie, the binding is not to my standards because I was rushing it so that I could finish this video. And I might redo it if it really bothers me, but actually it is fine in most sections and I could see myself leaving it because I was going for more of a homemade warmth to this project. So I feel like it kind of fits the vibes. I also wonder if I should have added a tie here and if I should have added quilting lines, but I kind of want to wear it a couple times and then tweak it if I find it necessary. If you're curious about how much of each shirt I have left, I would say the charcoal shirt is mostly done. And then I used a good amount of this shirt to make the first attempt at bias binding, but then actually that bias binding ended up not being the right size, so I couldn't use it. So then I ended up cutting this shirt for my second attempt at bias binding. And so both of these shirts I would say are like 2/3 done. They both have one sleeve on them each, so there's still a good amount of fabric there. And then I have the most of the orange shirt left over because it is the one shirt that was mostly polyester, so I wasn't really that excited to work with it, even though it is such a fun pattern. And it's probably the most like obviously autumnal, but I just didn't want to accidentally melt it. I am really glad that I used heat bond because that made things so much easier. And overall, this was a pretty fun project. If you recreate your own version of this vest, please tag me because I would love to see it. And now I'll cut to some detail shots of this vest, but I'll go ahead and say goodbye now. I'll see you in the next video.